What would you say you do here?
Strategery.
Oh, yes, I remember now. Missed it by that much.
You're listening to The Review on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Review. This is the Online Sports Guys College Football Podcast. We are the OSG Sports Team, OSG Nelson, OSG J-Dub, Jay Wilkerson 16, and me, OSG Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys. We have our own website. Okay, I'll talk about the phone app first, guys. Jeez. As you can see by what they were flashing in front of their respective cameras, we have a phone app. It's free. Download it at the Google Play Store. Download it at the Apple Store. It'll give you all of the OSG sports content, including our college football shows, and so much more. Guys, there's a lot to talk about this week, although there's a lot to talk about every week. The big news, of course, being word on Saturday morning that the MAC attack no MAC football in 2020. The implications here can go about 15 or so different directions. Anybody that wants to start, your thoughts? What's this all mean, or is this just an isolated incident?
I'll take it. I mean, I think that when you look at the bottom line when it comes to the Go Fives, as we call them here on the show, the group of fives, and those conferences, it is literally going to come down to their bottom lines and whether or not they think that they can handle testing, monitoring, whatever aspect you want to get into for all of this. And I think that for the Go Fives themselves, it came down to when you started to see the Power 5 games getting canceled, and the Power 5 teams, it's like, all right, we're only going to play conference games. When you had those, I want to say 33 or 34 games involving 26 schools that are traditionally their paydays, that to me seemed like a bit of the writing on the wall, unless they could have figured out something geographically like we've been talking about the last couple of shows. And Wilkie, I mean, for me, it seemed like an inevitability, and you had the MACtion step up first.
Well, they had a meeting on Thursday, and I think they were going to hammer away some kind of schedule. Yes, they were going to lose the income from their Big Ten their big brothers from the Big Ten, and there was something in the works. And I think it all came down to a bombshell that was dropped by Northern Illinois, who has won 7 MAC titles in the last 10 years, I believe, something like that. When their president, Lisa Freeman, basically dictated to their AD that you can put together a schedule, but we're not playing. And that just created a whole different firestorm within the MAC. And it led to that decision on Saturday morning that the MAC is just going to have to shut it down for the year. And I really think this is going to have catastrophic circumstances for those MAC schools. They do draw an income from some TV partners. It's not at the Power 5 level, but they still draw something. And I just see the whole trickle down with the non-rev sports in the college basketball. And I don't know if it's that great of a decision. I think they could have managed at least doing an all MAC schedule. If they had a +1, maybe bring in an FCS school, which are hurting right now. I'm just not sure it was a well thought out decision when Northern Illinois dropped that bombshell, and I'm not sure that was a great decision either. But J-Dub, I really feel that maybe it was made hastily. They were forced to make that kind of decision. I just think there's going to be a huge trickle down with that.
Oh, there's definitely going to be a huge trickle down with this, whether it be financially, whether it be, just emotionally for all these people involved. I mean, you keep talking about the Northern Illinois bombshell. I mean, it continued when the AD was talking about, if I won't put my own kid out there and the doctor tells me he won't put his kid out there, how in the world can I put other people's kids out there? So that's you got to look at that decision. And could there have been a better way? Sure. I think you can play this year. I agree with you. I think the +1 is a good idea, and I think that would limit the travel issues. It would limit the day-to-day infrastructure things that teams have to do on the sidelines with gators and social distancing, that type of stuff. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction. We've talked for several weeks about conferences like the SEC and the ACC dragging their feet, waiting to make this decision. There are some times you don't want to be first. And I think this is one of those times. I think the MAC's going to get some blowback.
But here's one of the trickle-down things, J-Dub, that I think could happen, because the Big Ten now has an out, because it seems like Kevin Warren, their commissioner, really wants to either get rid of the fall season and move it to the spring. There's reports out there that he'd much rather have a spring season. And now the MAC gives him an out within that region to do that. And I'm not sure if that's a good decision either. I really think if the Big Ten decides that they're going to eliminate the fall season and move to a spring, the Pac-12 is going to follow.
Look logistically. If you're an AD like this, you've already got a full slate of spring sports, and you put fall sports in the spring. It's going to be crazy trying to schedule all of that and get people to work it and bodies. Going to spring is not just a simple decision.
But there's a couple things at play here that we really haven't even touched on that much. A couple of the reports that I've read about the MAC decision, Northern Illinois and a couple other schools mentioned the cost of having to put in protocols, the expense of having to test the kids on a regular basis. And that expense alone was enough to make them kind of say, maybe we don't need to be spending that kind of money, particularly if we're not going to be bringing anything in. And that's the issue for a lot of the Group of Five and the smaller schools. It's not so much that they can play, whether they can play or not. It's affording testing.
Well, and think about this, J-Dub. Every single time you get a test, and J-Dub, you know this sadly from experience, but every single time someone wants to take that really large Q-tip and shove it up your nose, it's $100.
Yep.
And that's per person, however many times a week you want to do it. And so for me, I taking the Northern Illinois stuff aside and looking at it from just strictly the cost perspective, I know that, and Wilkie, you mentioned the TV contracts and what you can have action on Tuesdays and Wednesdays with the 4-letter and their other partners. For me, it comes down to, if you have, say, 90 kids on a team, $100 a shot. So if you do that once a week, that's $9,000. You do that for a 10-week schedule, you're looking at like $100,000, and over $100,000 for a season if you test once a week for a 10-game schedule, and that includes staffing and all that kind of stuff. So J-Dub, I looked at it. I didn't even look at the Northern Illinois aspect of it when it was introduced. I just looked at it strictly from, I don't think they have the quote-unquote disposable income, the money that they can devote to simple testing on a weekly basis.
Yeah, right. You look at rainy day funds. So there are a lot of these schools that don't have those, and it's going to be because you think about it, you have to get a COVID-19 compliance person in there. If you do PCR testing, then you have testing 6 days before and 3 days prior, and all. It's definitely a cost prohibitive thing, but I still think the MAC pulled the trigger a little too early. I think there's still too many variables out there unknown that
You got to look at it this way. Most of the MAC schools and some of the smaller Group of Five conferences aren't necessarily funded by the TV money as much as they are by student fees and things like that. And you're talking about a 6-figure outlay at minimum for each one of them.
Yeah.
And that's not something easy to do. You're talking at least 10% of their budget, if not more, just to have the testing, never mind the expense of putting on games, traveling, and everything else.
But
so
the MAC,
I get it from that perspective.
But the MAC, of all the Group of Five schools, the MAC has a pretty healthy donor base. So you could tap into that donor base pretty easily for the coronavirus testing. There are people that they have strong fan bases in the MAC. They may be smaller than the Big Ten, but they're strong, and there's some deep pockets there. So you could tap that revenue source as far as your coronavirus testing. But I agree with J-Dub. I don't think it was thought through when this decision was made. I think you had a group of university presidents and athletic directors that were shell-shocked by what Northern Illinois pulled, because they had a plan together and they were going to discuss that plan. and it just got totally blown up. And I don't know, out of sheer panic or what, they decided on Saturday just to get rid of the season and perhaps play in the spring. But if you can't play a football season, are you going to play fall sports season with soccer and the other fall sports? And can you play a winter season? Can you play college basketball? Now the NCAA tournament is in play. And if you go 2 years in a row without an NCAA tournament, I don't see how college athletics survives. Yeah. And so this is the first domino that's fallen with the MAC. And I'm going to sit back and watch the ripple effects, because I think it's going to be catastrophic to college athletics.
And you people are saying, look at how the NBA bubble's working. Yeah, you can't do college sports in a bubble. You can't do that. You don't have the same opportunities and access that these professional athletes do. And I can't see a university putting all their kids in. Now, I will have to say this, kudos to Wake Forest University. I was there yesterday. I wanted to get on campus just to see some of my old hangouts, and their COVID-19 lockdown procedures are legit. If you don't have ID, you can't get on campus. Mm-hmm. So for any reason. So there are universities out there.
So did you have your old ID?
No, I got turned around. I'm like, do you not know who I am? I mean, come on, check the media guides. You know where I am, but I couldn't get on. But I mean, you can't do the same thing in college sports with a bubble aspect. So that's apples and oranges. But I do agree with Wilkie. The NCAA tournament is now in play now, because you got to think about when is the domino going to happen with men's and women's basketball, and that's just right around the corner. And college sports will perish if we have 2 years without an NCAA tournament. At least the money will dry up.
And, guys, the ball's in the Big Ten's court now, because the MAC has made their action, and I think Kevin Warren is looking for that excuse to move on.
That was my next question. Is this going to give some other conferences pause? I know UConn dropped out early this past week, citing their costs and things like that.
UConn.
But they were the first.
UConn.
They were the first of the FBS teams to say it's not worth it, but at the same time, they didn't really have anybody. They would have had to go fishing for teams to play them, which is a whole other set of problems. Yeah. But does this give, and Wilkie kind of touched on this a little bit with Kevin Warren in the Big Ten, hinting at a possible spring season. Does this give other conferences, in particular the bigger conferences, that little window or a reason to say, hey, maybe we ought to reconsider this?
With all that money on the table and all those advertisers that are promised in, and all the money that's supposed to be rolling into your conference members, I'm not so sure.
But look at it this way. A lot of the stuff that I've read this weekend, it's not even the money anymore. A lot of these schools, a lot of the athletic directors, a lot of the presidents are really concerned about liability.
Yeah.
Because you've got kids
the insurance aspect is going to play here. But I'm going to think about the Big Ten here, because there's a network that they've got to send original programming to. You don't think Fox executives right now are kind of putting the pressure on Commissioner Warren, saying, look, we've gone, 5-6 months without live events, and we're replaying Michigan, Ohio State games from 1984 and 86 and whatever. We can't continue to do this. If you guys are going to benefit from the revenue that this network generates, we've got to have live programming.
Oh yeah.
And football is the one that is going to generate the high ratings, because the non-rev sports just aren't going to be able to generate the revenue and the ratings for original programming. So there's that aspect that is huge for Commissioner Warren. And we can talk about the insurance and liabilities and whatever. I think those can be taken care of with the revenue that they're going to get from their network, and even with a limited seating capacity. And I think with the general fund, with the excess there that can be tapped into, whatever, there's revenues that they can tap into for the insurance liability. But that network, and it'll be with the ACC and the SEC too, with ESPN. That is a huge pressure point for all the commissioners.
Yep.
But I'll give you this, and I shared this with you guys earlier this morning. There's an article by Ross Dellinger on SI.com that talks about what COVID, and J-Dub probably can speak to this a little bit too, the impact that COVID makes on some of these kids, seen or unseen, within their hearts. Do you want to be the athletic director that says, well, we got to be, our conference has to play to fulfill our TV obligations, but I got a kid with a myocardial infarction?
Well, I can tell you this, having survived this nasty thing, I've been doing a lot of research lately on, because I'm still having lung pain. I mean, I was diagnosed March 23rd, 24th, and I still can't, do as much physical activity as I did before the COVID. And I can only imagine, and I'm almost 50, and you can imagine, I'm a man, I'm 40, sorry. And you got to imagine these, 15, 20, 25-year-old college athletes, or high school athletes, they are a little bit better shape, but the permanent damage done to the heart, permanent damage done to the lung, permanent damage done to the brain with a lack of oxygen, there are some serious issues that even doctors and epidemiologists will say, we don't know all the effects that are going to happen. And it's almost like I'm waiting until like October, November, and I want to go have another x-ray of my lungs and figure out why do they still hurt. Yeah. And that's definitely a liability issue. And you also have to think about all these athletes now are saying, you can't have a season without us. And this whole We Are United thing where they're like, I'm not going to play. I mean, you're putting your life at risk and you're not taking care of my demands. I almost think I would be one of those athletes. If I was coming off of COVID, I would be one saying, hey, either put up or shut up, take care of me, or you'll be playing without me.
And that was one of the things I was going to get to as well. You're seeing in Big Ten athletes, we talked about last week, the Pac-12 athletes, the AAC has had a group of athletes band together too. And these kids are all speaking up because basically they're being told they're playing and they don't get paid for it. They get a scholarship, but it's not quite the same thing. And to put their health at risk, that's the balance the athletic directors have. TV contracts be damned. That's not going to override the health and safety of a 20-year-old who goes to a party and gets sick, or goes to a party, gets the infection and passes it on to somebody else. And that's the balance here that they're still trying to juggle. The TV contracts are almost irrelevant when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Well, I haven't seen any percentages as far as athletes that don't want to play as opposed to ones that want to play.
66 players have opted out so far, including Micah Warren from Penn State, who is supposedly one of the best defensive football players in the country this season.
No, he is.
I sent you a list now. I don't have it.
So let's say
66 of 120 Division I FBS programs.
Yeah, so you're looking at 66 out of, I'm trying to do math here on the show, and I know that's traditionally very difficult for me. So 66 out of 12,000 right now, if you max out your numbers.
And there are, this is unintended silver lining benefits to this. You look at Maryland, right? Josh Jackson's opted out. But then you have, Talia Tagovailoa, who got transferred in. He's just got a waiver. He can play this year. He's eligible. So there's a silver lining to this for him because Josh Jackson opted out. Tagovailoa can step in and do something for the Terps this year.
But you've got guys like Rashad Bateman from Minnesota, who's one of the country's leading wide receiver candidates.
Yep.
He's bailed out.
Rondale
Moore from Purdue. You've got some named players.
Don't think for a second that a school that sees someone opt out, regardless of level of accomplishment or future or what have you, don't think for a second that coaches aren't going to sit there, as Wilkie said, and say, okay, guy on the depth chart, Rashad Bateman, you're off to the side. Okay, who is my second string X receiver? That means you're the guy who I'm anticipating to start. They're looking at this strictly as right now they still have to practice and they have to get ready for a football season. If Rashad Bateman's not around, then I'm sure some kid from the upper Midwest who is a part of that Minnesota roster is going to be more than happy to sit there and say, oh, Rashad's not here. I get a chance to play. It's about opportunity for a lot of these kids. I mean, I understand. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I understand players and the desire to opt out. I completely get it. But don't think for a second that there aren't coaches in college football and players who are on these rosters that when they see someone above them opt out, they look at this as an opportunity.
Go. I'm sorry, J-Dub, go.
I'm saying I was only talking about my experience at Wake Forest. We had 135, 140 people on a team, and I remember this is back in the day. We actually had names on magnets, masking tape on a magnet on a board on the depth chart. And if someone got injured, slid out, the whole section would slide up.
Yep.
So I mean, as a player who was not a marquee athlete, I was not a starter. Like I wasn't like Justin Fields at Ohio State, but if that happened, you step in. What was the baseball reference? The baseball player that there was an injury at first base.
Oh, Wally Pipp.
Wally
Pipp. Yeah. And that was the next man up. And I agree with Nelson in the fact that you have the right to step, to opt out if you want to. It's your health. Do what makes you feel better. But there are people there. There are hundreds of thousands of college athletes that will never see a field under normal circumstances that are getting opportunities now because of people opting out. So that's why I said earlier, there's that silver lining for that person who's stepping in, getting the waiver, transfer in. There's some options. The dominoes are in play.
So 66 of what we say 1,500 collegiate players in the FBS level have opted out. If you play a spring season, that number balloons.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got kids that are not going to risk their NFL draft status. And you've got kids that are saying, wait a minute, you're asking me to play a spring season, take a month off, and then go through another fall camp? Nope. You can't do it. And that's why spring, to me, is not an option.
I don't see that being as a feasible thing, really, realistically either. Just from the physical toll alone, like you said. But I guess the part I'm trying to understand is trying to think of a good way to say this.
Money is always in play.
Money is always in play, but where do you draw the line between a TV deal and doing what's right for the people that you're responsible for? And that's the part.
Here's your line. Group of 5, Power 5.
Yeah, that's two different things.
That's your line.
But look at it. Even a lot of us here have covered high school athletics. Think about the same thing for high school, booting a fall season to the spring. I mean, it's just as infeasible to do it in high school as it is in college, if not more so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hey, think about all of those. Think about all of the athletes, and if you look at it from a high school perspective, think about all those athletes that are in the top 100s or the top 300s that these days leave early to start their college careers. Yeah. That means if you have a championship that is after December 16th, which is early signing day for 2020 and 2021, if your championship game is after that date, you're going to see kids sit there, and we've already seen it with some of the athletes that are top 50 in the state of Georgia that are heading to Power 5 schools. They're like, nope, opting out, not happening, I'm not going to be there. If you shift all of that to the spring, you're going to see this mass gap of all of these high school football players looking to play at the next level, and it's going to be the same with college players who want to have their shot at playing in the pros. You will have gaps when it comes.
But how do you put a high school game on the field if you've got an outbreak amongst your team, which is something that we're seeing here in the state of Georgia, and you've got 20 cases on your team, you can't go play. Period.
And a name we all know well, Harrison Bailey, who left and enrolled in Tennessee early last year, right? So I mean, as quarterback, he would not have played in a championship game had it aired in the spring, because he was already on in the Tennessee campus.
Yeah, exactly. But you to your point, Phil, you look at the baseball example. I mean, you've had the St. Louis Cardinals haven't played a game in a week and a half because of a COVID outbreak.
Talk to the Marlins.
And who are now the best team in baseball right now, because I guess it's been kind of good for them.
Yeah.
But
9 pitchers in 9 games, I tell you, that's crazy.
It is crazy. But my point is, they've ridden out the storm, and they're using it as a long rain delay. Now, you may have to cancel a couple of high school games, and that may affect their playoff status, but so be it. I mean, you've got to be in quarantine for a little while, and it may cost them a couple of games. But it sounds like to me, to me, it depends on if the players want to play. And I don't know, John, you can speak more to this about the high school players than I can, because I'm not intimate with high school football anymore as I used to be. But it just seems like those guys want to play. I know some of the guys at my son's high school, they want to play. Yeah. And that's what it comes down to.
But I mean, you got to look at it this way. I kind of see where Phil's coming from. I kind of see where we all are. It comes down to what's more important: losing revenue or losing life.
Yeah, it's
And
a total risk reward.
That's where you got to look at. And John Wilkie, I'm at a high school now where people just want to play. I understand that, but at the same time, is that what's best for their long range health? So that's these conferences. And the MAC said that this was a decision made, toil and consideration and other things. And I'm like, you can't say that. You have that risk reward, and I don't know what's more important. Is it money or players? And that's where we're at right now.
So what happens if this week the Big Ten and the Pac-12 follows with a no longer playing a fall season, maybe going to spring? Who knows? Now we got the ACC, SEC, and Big 12. If they hold serve, what happens then?
Well, the SEC's already gone on record this weekend saying we're playing. Period.
Yep.
Whether you play or not, we're playing. And at that point, maybe you end up going to a conference. Your conference championship all of a sudden becomes your de facto championship game.
How is
or
Swofford
those
going
three
to be
conferences? Or those three conferences decide we're going to have our own playoff.
Yep.
And you probably have the precursor to the CFA version 2.0, or the Power Fives break off from the NCAA once and for all, and this sets them up for that dynamic. If they prove to themselves that they can pull this off on their own, then it is going to be peace out Boy Scout when they stare at Mark Emmert in Indianapolis.
And I love your CFA. I love your CFA comparison there, because remember the Big Ten and the Pac-12, Pac-8 back then, broke off from all that, and the other conferences had their own little coalition. I can see, because you got three football-centric conferences that would be aligned. The Big Ten, very football-centric, but a different attitude. Let's put it that way. Pac-12 is, well, they're out on the West Coast.
Yeah, they're over here. Thank you, Larry Scott. Over here.
So I can conceivably see that the Big 12, the SEC and the ACC go ahead with their fall seasons and cobble together something of a playoff. And ESPN, ABC, pick your network.
They
goes
will
a little
eat
money that way.
Oh.
I can see that's a possibility. Or it's just something I just gave a sports executive an idea. They're going to run with it tomorrow morning in a board meeting.
Now you brought up Mark Emmert. What is going through his head right now? Does he see the writing on the walls?
I think holy bleep is going through his mind right now.
But
and if it's not, it should
really had control over the Power Five. I mean,
he needs to lose control of the FCS, because he's totally screwed the FCS.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we haven't even mentioned about those schools. I mean, we touched on it a little bit. But
I was going to say, is that the B block this week?
Is that the transition?
It could be. Mr. Producer?
Okay, we could do that.
Go for it.
I'm thinking that this is like to take us to the halftime break here. So stick around. When we come back, we'll talk about the FCS, the smaller schools, plus a whole bunch of news, notes, and things left unsaid here on the review. You are listening to the review on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
The online sports guys would love to hear from you. Go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports for a comment, rant, or just whatever's on your mind about college football.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinsky of Apolinsky & Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is.
Thanks for sticking around, folks. You've made it to the second half of the show. This is The Review. We are the Online Sports Guys. This is the OSG Sports Podcasting Network, and we are talking college football because John likes waving his phone in front of the camera. For those of you watching and listening at home, he is, of course, OSG Nelson, Jay Wilherson 16, and OSG J-Dub.
Nicely done.
I am OSG Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys.
3 Johns and a Phil.
Wanting to find us, interact, have questions, or curious about what we do, look us up.
Whoa, Wilkie. Whoa.
Yeah, we just killed Phil's groove here.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, thanks for breaking it up.
3 Johns, no waiting. Here we go.
They know who we are, Phil.
Find us on Facebook at OSG Sports, Twitter at OSG Sports. If you're watching, chances are you're seeing us at OSG Sports on YouTube. Yeah. And then, of course, there is Zingo.tv up in Canada. Channel 250 for those of you watching. You can catch us on Wednesday and Friday, I believe,
and
in the afternoon.
Random time, so just keep an eye on that stuff. The grid is wide open, but Wednesday and Friday leading into your weekends right now.
Guys, in the first half of the show, we talked quite a bit about what's going to happen with big boy football, the football bowl teams, the Division I teams, the Group of Five, whatever you want to call them. The part we kind of sort of overlooked or haven't really gotten into is the impact of all of this on the lower levels, like the football championship subdivision and lower. We already know a lot of the Division II and Division III schools have kind of opted out for the season. It looks like the FCS is on its way to doing the same thing. Wilkie, your home conference, the Missouri Valley, this week announcing they're going to push back to spring.
Yeah, they're going to do a spring season. And, let's put it in perspective with the FCS level. The Missouri Valley Football Conference is the SEC of that division. And you've got schools like North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Illinois State that are consistently in the playoffs. And now they have no clue what they're going to do. I mean, North Dakota State had a huge game with Oregon, a game they probably thought they could have had a chance to win. And have a party in Fargo. I don't know. I mean, there's some big boys on that North Dakota State team. But what's interesting, this came out Friday, and I saw a little soundbite with Kyle Motes, the athletic director at my alma mater, Missouri State, talking about their game with Oklahoma, and they still plan on playing that in the fall. And they have another game with, I think it's Tarleton State, which is a FCS school that has not announced that conference hasn't, the Southland Conference is still playing. So there was 2 potential fall games for Missouri State. Oh, by the way, they're going to play a spring schedule against their Missouri Valley opponents. So if anything has made this crazy, this pandemic, this is kind of off the charts. Oh, by the way, have I mentioned Bobby Petrino's the head coach at Missouri State?
No, you have not. Everybody drink.
It's the Bobby Petrino drinking game.
Yeah, it is.
And Jim Tressel is at Youngstown State, so it's where everybody goes to end up. I just think if I was North Dakota State, and
barnstorming tour,
they got like a 39 game winning streak or something like that, and you're telling me that we're not playing. It's like, I mean, like I said, there are a lot of big bodies out there, and like I'm looking at that like, how this goes back to our earlier conversation. Let's play. If Missouri State's going to play Oklahoma, that's what, August 29th, I think, into August.
No,
it's been moved back, but to a date to be named later.
But I still think they're all like, if they're doing it, how come we can't do it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. By the way, you mentioned about North Dakota States are winning. Our good friend Jeff Culhane, the voice of the Bison, doesn't have enough fingers for all the championship rings that he's got, I'm sure.
Yeah. I just, right now, what we were doing the math before in show prep. Right now, the Big South, the Ohio Valley, the SoCon, and the Southland are the only 4 that don't have not announced that they're pushing things to a later or a spring schedule. But what you have in those 4 conferences You've got in the Big South, you've got Kennesaw, who has made deep runs into the playoffs in the FCS. You've got Campbell, J-Dub, who is intimately familiar with them. Charleston Southern, who has more than happy to go and take a payday game when they have the opportunity. Then, Wilkie, you mentioned the Missouri Valley, and we probably should just be the flagship station for Missouri Valley football. And
I'm okay with that.
I would have zero issue with it. Ohio Valley, you have an up-and-coming Austin P program.
Mm-hmm.
You have all of the directional Tennessee programs, and you've got Southeast Missouri and Murray State and Jacksonville, who are perennial playoff teams as well. Then you're looking,
conference.
Yeah, and then you look at the Southern, which, as we all know, is knockdown, drag-out games in the FCS in this part of the country, with Mercer and Furman and Western Carolina and Wofford, UTC, Citadel, and an ETSU program that has come back online. And in the Southland, Sam Houston State, traditional power. Stephen F. Austin, who's poked in the door. You've got Nichols. That's a great conference too. So you've got
Central
McNeese,
Arkansas. Yeah, there's some really good.
And so all of these teams are the heavyweights in 1AA right now, and I can understand why they're not saying anything with these four conferences that are on the board still.
Yep. You mentioned the Southland and the other league. They've got pretty respectable fan bases too. I know some of those Southland schools, they travel and they fill up their stadiums. You're talking about 15,000, 10,000 seat stadiums, but they're pretty much packed. And I don't know if they want to risk that. Which rivalry games? It's Stephen F. Austin. I forget, not Stephen F. Austin. It's Sam Houston, and that plays down at Reliance Stadium in Houston. Oh, Texas State. Is it Texas State?
Yeah, I think it's. I'm efforting.
We've had it on a rivalry show, and that's one of the ones that I know of it, but I forget who the other opponent is. But
Battle of the Piney Woods with Stephen F. Austin.
Yes, the Battle of the Piney Woods, and that drew almost 30,000 to Reliance Stadium, I believe, a couple of years ago. So they have some pretty respectable fan bases down there that I'm sure want to see it keep going.
And I can tell you from a Big South standpoint, because Campbell's a new Big South member coming in from the Pioneer, having Kennesaw State traveled, and the Big South teams travel, and Barker Lane Stadium was just packed with people coming in there from the Big South schools and even local schools like Shaw and Elon. But it's like you got to think about how you want to do that. Some of these really big rivalries are going to be left to the wayside, and that's why they're waiting to pull that trigger, I think, anyway.
Well, we forget, too, that even if they do play all these games, there's not likely to be anybody in the building to see it other than the coaches, maybe some family members, and any writers who are able to get into the press box.
And the public address announcer.
Attaboy.
There'll be a couple of cameras there so they can watch it online.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they do watch.
Yeah, and that's the one thing about the Big South. The Big South has a really, really extensive streaming with the 4-letter plus.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, that's a big deal. Moving on really quick here, want to hit on something that the SEC put out this week, and that's some of their coronavirus guidelines. And J-Dub, one that really jumped out off the table to you is having guys wearing neck gaiters along with the coaches and everybody else on the sideline wearing masks.
Well, there's one thing about wearing a gaiter or a mask when you're on the sidelines, but it's actually said in the report that competing players on the field will have neck gaiters on to put on during timeouts or conferring with coaches. I don't know about you guys. When you put on a football helmet, you can't get the gaiter above. So you got to take the helmet off, put the gaiter on, put the helmet back on, unless they hook it around the ears and pull it down. I'm not a fashion police person, but that just doesn't seem.
As a logistics person, it's not.
I just don't see how that's going to work.
Well, taking the helmet off is a 15-yard unsportsmanlike penalty too.
Yeah,
so I'll just take the COVID. I'll take the COVID.
No, you won't.
You've already had it already.
Is it really going to make a difference after the first time they actually if they actually play the game and they actually run into each other and hit each other and play and don't have it on? What's the difference at that point?
It's like you put lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig. And I think that that's just a placation of, yeah, we'll just have the players wear this thing. It's not on the sidelines. One thing, if I'm a competing player, now granted, if I'm baseball, I can understand having the net gator on, like Mike Trout hitting home runs, but it just doesn't seem logistically right or possible or necessary.
If you have a net gator on and you're not wearing it for the first 3 plays before a timeout, what's the difference at that point?
Exactly.
What purpose does that serve?
I've already spit on you in the scrum anyway, so what does it matter? I read that literally was like, what? Not.
Yeah, never mind the fact that if you're on the field, chances are you've already passed a battery of tests to begin with. And the SEC, the other SEC guideline there was that I think it's 2 or 3 tests a week, the last one being 3 days before your game.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure how much that really...
Because then that way, if you get a positive, you can determine if it's a false positive and have those tests in line before you're supposed to hop on the field on Saturday. So I understand that dynamic.
Yeah, that's why you get the PCR test that goes in that first day. Then you have it 6 days out and 3 days out. I mean, it makes sense. It's almost like it's trying to combat the bubble mentality. We'll keep testing you to make sure. But yeah, I mean, when I got tested the first time, I got a negative, and then I got a positive. So you got to work. The false is both ways.
That's
so
2
if
out
you
of
get a
3.
false negative, yeah, exactly. Best 2 out of 3. But yeah, it's again, that goes back to what we talked about in the first block about it being cost prohibitive as well, because those PCR tests are not cheap either.
And moving off of COVID and the football schedule, a really big to-do this week out in Colorado State, where everything to do with the college football program has been put on hold because of an investigation that kind of spurred out of a report earlier in the week saying that there was a hostile environment among other problems. Yeah. Not only under current coach Steve Adazio, but dating back to former coach Mike Bobo.
Yeah.
Which
I think we've all met Bobo. So
yeah,
I mean,
I was going to say, which surprises.
Well, I haven't met Mike Bobo,
but Bobo, that just completely seems like it's out of character.
Yeah.
But
well, I never met Mike Bobo, but I do know Steve Adazio.
Yeah.
And he now he's a guy from the Northeast. He's an Italian guy from the Northeast. He gets his point across. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
When I read all this, the first thing I thought about was kind of a culture conflict there. I mean, he's very direct. Read between the lines here. Very direct. Italian Northeast guy.
No BS
I just
zone.
don't. Yeah, exactly. I think that's part of this. But if it's going back to when Mike Bobo was a head coach, there's somebody within that program that's perpetuating that.
Because Adazio brought in most of his own staff when he came in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, he did.
But
I never understood that hire in the first place. Adazio struggled at Boston College, trying to elevate that program and never really got much traction or went very far with it. But then I realized that after reading a little further, the consultant that Colorado State used for the job was Urban Meyer.
And Adazio was the offensive coordinator for Urban. They're real tight. And, I was happy for Coach Adazio. I mean, I'm glad he landed because I know the last few years of BC weren't ideal for him. And I thought he landed at a great place in Colorado State. It's a little bit off the beaten trail for him, but I thought it was a great place for him to kind of rehab his career.
But I mean, going back to even Mike Bobo, when he was on the Rick staff at Georgia, I just reading some of the things, like reading the Colorado article and seeing some of the background that was published, I just find it hard to believe that someone like a Mike Bobo was involved in any of the perpetuation of some of these aspects. And even Mark Richt really came to his defense on Twitter, and I'm like, I kind of agree with Wilkie that if it was there with Bobo and Adazio brought in his whole new staff, there's somebody else going on maybe above the staff that is setting this culture. and maybe Adazio's just kind of falling on the sword right now. I mean, of course, if some of the things he said were true, now granted, back when I was coached, I mean, I had clipboards broke over my head. I had my helmet turned sideways, called 3 names from Sunday, and that's just the way football was back then. And you didn't take it seriously. But nowadays it's this whole cancel culture of, oh, he was rude to me, let's blow the whistle on the whole campaign. I'm not dissing anything that possibly happened. I'm not saying anybody's point is not valid, but 30 years ago when I was on the field, if he did that to me over an academic grade, I'd have gone back and done a better job in class. And times are different, and I think the lens with which we look at things is different. But I have a hard problem blaming Mike Bobo for this.
John, really,
and I feel a little bit the same about Adazio. I mean, I think there's an element within that program that's perpetuating this, J-Dub. I totally agree with you, and I think you've brought up a good point about your playing days at Wake Forest. With the coaches, how they dealt with you. But you know what? They loved you in the locker room and outside afterwards. So it was nothing personal. And I think
you guys all know Bill Dooley. I mean, he was, not the softest of pairs, but we did what we were told to do. And if he blew that air horn at you one time, you knew better. You knew better than you had to come running.
Yeah.
John.
No, I
haven't heard from you much on this.
I didn't really interrupt.
Well, no. I mean, because we have the experience. We had the experience from J-Dub about being a player. We have the knowledge base of Wilkie with Steve Adazio, and from what we've seen with Mike Bobo, we knew him as a player coming from Thomasville, Georgia, playing at the University of Georgia. We knew what he was as a coach. So for me, I think that we're right on here in the notion that there's got to be someone who's been a bridge individual from the Bobo administration to the Adazio administration, who has information or is saying information about both of the coaches. And I think that's where we are here. I want to say it was Gamecocks Online on Twitter had the quotes attributed to what Mike Bobo allegedly said in meetings and things like that. So until the investigation's over, I'm more than willing to sit here and see what the lay of the land is at Colorado State University. But it's it was interesting to see all this stuff come to the fore this past week. So we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, and I do want to wrap up one point on there that we really hadn't touched on. One of the accusations against Adazio was that the players had been instructed to mask COVID symptoms because they might lose playing time, and that they have tried to circumvent some of the COVID protocols that the schools put in place.
Now, one thing Adazio has allegedly said that COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement are distractions from football. He's not really wrong with that because they are distractions of sorts. They matter. They're legitimate, things. But you got to look at the intent from that comment. You can be a distraction and not be like against it. You know what I'm saying? Like, some things are just we have a football. We're here to play football, and sometimes things practice. And I think that's based on what I've read, that's I've seen both sides of that. The players are saying he's disagreeing with Black Lives Matter, and some are saying that he's just trying to play football.
Yeah, but in this era of being relatable to your players and being able to understand where they're coming from and their backgrounds, that's not exactly a great way to endear yourself to pretty much anybody on your roster.
Well, Adazio's defense, and I agree with you, J-Dub, on those points. At Boston College, he had players that came from his neck of the woods. Adazio was born and raised in Connecticut. He's a Northeast guy. These are guys with the same kind of mindset that he had. And so if he said some of the things that J-Dub said about the Black Lives Matter movement and COVID, the BC players would they asked Coach Adazio, let's go out and play, blah, blah, blah. Different in Colorado. It's a whole different mindset. I lived out in the West for a while. It's a totally different mindset than what it is in the Northeast. And I can see where the feathers were ruffled by some of the things Coach Adazio said. But I tend to agree. I agree with J-Dub there. I mean, you're there to play football, but there's these things as well. So I just think, again, I brought up the point that it's a little bit of a clash of cultures, and I think that's what it is with Steve Adazio and Colorado State right now.
Guys, why don't we wrap up here with the last topic of discussion for the day? And it's something that I wrote about on theonlinesportsguys.com this week.
Nice plug.
Thank you. I do remember things from time to time, even though I'm getting old, as evidenced by the grayness of the beard.
You need to shine that thing.
All this talk about changing schedules and delaying games and everything else, the one thing that we really haven't discussed and hasn't been really put out on the table yet, and I thought about it this week, is if we push back the schedule as far as we're talking about going and still play games, there's not going to be a bowl season this year. There's no way they could do it.
There wasn't going to be one anyway.
Well, there would have been. Had they not, if the season played as a normal season, there would have been. But without the season and everything being pushed back, the SEC championship game, if it's being played in mid to late December, when are you going to have time for the bowl games? You're talking about 35, 40 cities that are going to be out, a holiday windfall, so to speak, for people going to their towns, spending money. You're talking about holiday programming for ESPN that's not that's going to no longer exist.
So here's, and this is what I was doing while you guys were wrapping up on Colorado State. Right now, as it stands, and Redbox Bowl has already said that they are off the board. They're not going to have their game at Levi's this year. So there are 8 bowl games directly tied to Group of 5 conferences only. Eight bowl games of the Go Fives. Of the Power Fives, and this includes the CFP, you're talking 22 games that are tied to that. And then you have another 12, if my math is right, that are splits, where you have a Go 5 and a Power 5. So I think that the Power 5s might be a different issue, because once again, you're talking CFP and you're talking all those big games that we're used to seeing on January 1st, et cetera, like we saw when we were all tied to our television sets starting at noon on January 1st and not a day before. What I would think is that those 22 would still be okay. The ones that are split, those 12, they have an issue. The Go Fives, once again, depending on who it is, those 8, I think that, they could or could not be a part of things. So I think that you could see a mixed bowl schedule, meaning that you could have some, but you won't have them all. I don't think that the whole thing gets completely blown out.
What are the TV contracts like with those Go 5 bowls? I mean, is it network locked or are they?
I think most of them are ESPN events.
ESPN events, yeah.
So ESPN events basically are in charge of all those bowls. The TV comes in that contract, and I don't think it's a whole lot of money either. I think it's more just an event that ESPN puts and brings their muckety mucks over for entertaining weekend in Memphis or Charlotte or wherever bowl they want to attend. But to me, it's cities like Nashville, cities like Charlotte, those mid-sized cities that they have NFL franchises, some don't. I don't know if it's even a blip on the radar anymore as far as the revenue that they bring in, because I see a lot of empty seats, and I see a lot of matchups where fans can come in the day of and leave after the game. So I just don't see how it's a big windfall for the cities as it was in the past. I think for the New Year's Six, that might be a little bit of a different issue, because there's still some prestige there. And really, those are the bowls that have kind of set themselves apart and have tradition. And the others, I mean, the Gator Bowl used to be kind of a cool bowl, but does anybody care anymore?
No.
Well, it was like, Tennessee was in the bowl game last year.
Tennessee and Indiana.
I could have gotten a ticket that day and driven out to see that bowl game. So, and in Charlotte, the Belk Bowl. I mean, it's literally, people here are like, man.
It's the Duke's Bowl, sir. Get it right.
It's the Belk Bowl to me.
They're made for TV events.
They are.
Well, it's like, when I worked out in Spokane, Washington, we covered when Wazoo made it to the Rose Bowl against Michigan. That's the old Ryan Leaf, Brian Greasy Bowl. We went down to Pasadena. That was like a week. It was like an event. It was more than just a game. And these little cities like Charlotte and Nashville, they don't have that type of, even the Peach Bowl down in Atlanta is more than just a game. And I think, some of I think the Big Six, the New Year's Day Six, I think those are the ones we're still going to see.
Hey, I went to the Blockbuster Bowl in Miami in '95, Arkansas, North Carolina, in Miami at Joe Robbie Stadium, where back then it was called Joe Robbie Stadium. Yep. There was probably 12,000 fans in the arena, in the stadium, but I was there.
And CarQuest Bowl.
CarQuest Bowl, that's it.
CarQuest Bowl, Joe Robbie Stadium, South Carolina, West Virginia, Steve Tannehill at quarterback.
And still the best of the bowl games to go to as a media member, the Outback Bowl, strictly because of the halftime meal.
Yes. Now, we won't talk about the Poulan Weed Eater Independence Bowl that we went to, Wake Forest versus Oregon. Ronnie Harris and the Ducks sent them packing.
Yeah, I went to an Arkansas, Georgia Independence Bowl in '91. Not impressed.
LSU, Michigan State, Blaine McAllister to Andre Rison in a packed Independence Stadium. Wow.
That doesn't take a lot of people in Independence Stadium. I'm just saying.
It's a state fair attitude there.
Yeah, it was.
But the bowl system's dead, guys. I mean, as
we knew,
laying on its back and its feet are up.
Yeah, those mixed 12. They better be finding different revenue sources.
So you're saying Tango uniform on the bowl season?
Yeah, it's about time.
Toes up, Tango uniform.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely, their better days are behind them. Guys, what do you say we wrap it up on this week's episode? I just said weep.
There you go. Well, considering what folks might have thought.
Have another.
Folks might have thought about what we were saying. It might be weeps up. So go ahead with the blatant plug and send us home.
That is true. And just be aware, folks, after this show is taped, there may be a whole lot of things that change before we join you next week. So if you have any questions, any topics, any things that you want us to discuss on the show, let us know. You can find us on social media at OSG Sports, on both Facebook and YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at OSG Sports as well. Don't forget the phone, which John loves to flash in front of the camera, the phone app, the OSG Sports phone app. It's free. Download it now from the Google Play Store, the Apple Store. Just look up OSG Sports pretty much anywhere you want to look. You'll find us. We are there. For my good friend Jay Wilkerson 16, OSG J-Dub, OSG Nelson, I am OSG Phil. We are the Online Sports Guys. Thanks for tuning in this week, everybody. We'll catch you again next week. Bye-bye.